Taylor Swift was here, and she brought us like an additional couple $100,000 worth of business. I spent $100 at the restaurant. I want to be consuming $35 worth of product. And for us, like we had cars wrapped around our building trying to get in, just orders are printing off.
Today's conversation is with my brother-in-law, Bryan Hillard. He's worked his way up from entry-level restaurant roles to running both District Tap locations here in Indianapolis. In today's conversation, we get into topics like why restaurants fail, how they actually make money, and how he got to where he's at today. I learned a lot from him, and I hope you guys enjoy this conversation. Let's start with this initial question. You've been in restaurants for a long time.
Mm-hmm.
Why do you think most restaurants fail, in your opinion?
Yeah, I think a lot of restaurants try to be too much. I think about places that want to have 437 different items on the menu. A lot of restaurants try to expand when they don't organically have a plan to expand. They just think kind of like that might is right mindset of if I have 10 restaurants, I'm more successful than if I have one restaurant. So they kind of grow before the guest and the consumer says, you have a product that we want in this particular situation. And then so typically it's things like that. Of course, there's rising costs and inflation. In the last 5 years, there's kind of been more uncontrolled closings than there's ever been. But most of the time, if you can spend a little bit of time, it's typically one of those things.
So is it mainly then, from your perspective, that they don't find one good thing they're really good at, basically?
Yeah. And it's, you see it, you go to a cheesecake factory, right? And you open up their menu, it's got 100 items, which the good news is they have an identity, right? It's the dessert, but you could tell they don't have an identity outside of the dessert, right? Yeah. And so you go and they got a page of pasta and a page of Chinese food and a page of burgers and steaks. Just they don't, and it sounds like I'm picking on them specifically, but it's kind of like a staple for restaurant. They don't know what they are, so they try to be a little bit of everything. And so when you come in, it kind of just feels like a hodgepodge of things thrown together and not a true identity.
Yeah, that makes sense, because I know for a Cheesecake Factory, for sure, it's like, what the heck do I order? It takes forever.
Yeah.
And that maybe like prevents me from going there. It's a little expensive too.
That
probably helps. But
that's part. That's a huge element too. Is the food cost? Is how do I price things to where I'm making it to where I'm able to make money, but also the guests can come in and feel like they're getting a good value for what they're paying for. And I've interviewed people and I've worked for different companies and kind of heard a lot of different opinions. And I always try to keep it like at that sweet spot of somewhere between 35 and 40%, which would be high to most people's mindset. But I'm really trying to bring good value to people. And so we try to stay there. And some places, right, they're expensive, but you don't feel like you're getting good for expensive. And that kind of falls under that wheelhouse.
So 35 to 40% in terms of over just your food costs?
Yeah, so if I come in theory, right, I spend $100 at the restaurant. I want to be consuming $35 worth of product is kind of how I try to gear our menu.
Okay. What does that process look like then for figuring out what that one focal point is?
Yeah, I would say usually your consumer will tell you early on. So for us, we've been a restaurant for about 11 years, right? And we consider ourselves to still be green and growing. But typically, like, hey, when I put this on the menu, it performs really well, right? And so it's not always just that item, but that signifies, oh, these are the types of things that guests consider me to be. And you need to like embrace that and grow into those items.
Okay. So is it, you generally know that from the start, or does it, would you say, actually kind of as you sell stuff, you figure it out?
Yeah, I mean, you should know what you want to be in a sense from the start, but you need to be open to curving that based off of what the consumer is saying that they want you to be.
So at District Tap, how would you say it like started out? What was the focal point? And maybe what is it today?
Yeah, certainly our focal point when we opened, right, is we wanted to be a craft beer scene. There was a big boom of like wanting to explore different breweries in the late 2010s, right? So that's where we were kind of from our inception. And we kind of grew into a place that was like an elevated food scene and was also a place where you could watch a lot of sports. So we've almost doubled down on how many TVs that we have because sports clearly is what people were there for. And whereas we just kind of considered us a good craft beer place. We spend more time focusing on food, and I would almost say bourbon more than beer, even though we're moving still a good amount of beer.
So maybe the central focus now for District Tap is more that it's an experience around sports,
Yeah.
and then everything else is kind of secondary. Do you
Yeah,
think, in a
it's
way?
it's certainly we want to provide a good all-around experience. But most of the people who come in are there to watch some sort of sport, or they're there about to go to some sort of sporting event for sure.
Yeah. You guys obviously have the two locations, one right by Gamebridge downtown,
Mhm.
one in Carmel. Is it pretty different, or do people still go in Carmel?
Oh
for,
yeah, they're very different. So the good news is because we're right there on 82nd Street, is they go downtown for a sporting event. They have us at their downtown location, but then they see us at the north side location, so where it's more of like a residential neighborhood watching the game on TV spot. They hear about us at the downtown while they're downtown for a big event. And sometimes it's vice versa, right? We get those residents of Fishers, Carmel, that northeast Indy vibe, and they know us there. So when they go downtown, they're like, "Oh, that's that place right in my neighborhood." So it feels safe and comfortable for them.
So then, I guess in terms of one thing I've heard you talk about is that it's obviously big events help a ton.
Mhm.
More people are downtown. How much can that make or break a year for you guys?
Yeah, so it's funny because we're talking about that now because we're in December, right? You're always reflecting on the past year and then
Yeah.
making a plan for the new one. So we're coming off 1 year removed from Taylor Swift, right? We're in December, last November, Taylor Swift was here, and she brought us like an additional couple $100,000 worth of business just in the 3 days that she was here. And we're coming up on an event like the Final Four that we didn't have last year here in town. And so we're hoping that can bring us another 150,000. So some of these swings are literally six-figure sales swings. And when you combine them all over the course of a year, like this year, for example, last winter we had Taylor Swift, we had an incredible Pacers run, right? And then we had some good concerts over the summer. And then the Fever made it all the way to the semifinals for the women's team. And then now IU was one of the teams playing in the Big Ten championship. Collectively, that probably brought us in $1 million worth of additional sales that you wouldn't be able to count on.
All those events together.
Yeah.
And Indy's great because you're more than likely going to have some big events.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
you're talking about.
We talk about it all the time. One day we might wake up and we're not drawing what we've been drawing, but we're riding that high for sure right now.
Yeah, absolutely. It's been some great events around Indy. So I guess if you guys didn't have that, is that make or break?
I would say just because the northern store is more residential, we know we can have success just on the regular, everyday, your neighborhood restaurant. But as far as the downtown location, it makes enough swing to where we've got to have a draw because people don't live downtown, right? They work downtown, and we're kind of in that post era where everybody went to work every day. And most of the people that have jobs in downtown companies, they are either hybrid or fully remote. So you can't necessarily count on that office lunch or happy hour after work vibe.
Mhm.
So there's got to be some sort of draw to bring people downtown, whether it's big events or a high profile foodie scene. There's just got to be something.
So how far do you guys try to forecast out?
I would say, like right now in December, we're creating a goal. We would call them like a BHAG, a big, hairy, audacious goal, right? We want to do this, right? Which our goal is to grow each store by $250,000 next year in revenue. That's an annualized goal, but a lot of the big events that are going to happen next year, we don't even necessarily know what they're going to be, right? When I was in January of last year, I didn't know the Pacers were going to make it to Game 7 of the NBA Finals. So you're kind of more treating things quarterly, a couple months at a time, rolling with the punches, but then you have a long-term goal of what you want to accomplish.
Okay, that makes sense. So I guess really what I'm asking is, do you have to assume almost that no big events will come, like for cash flow purposes or margin?
Yeah, I would say we treat it as if every year is just going to be an average year.
Okay.
And then some years there might be a little bit less, some years there might be a little bit more.
So that, I guess that gets into like the forecasting of revenue, how much are you guys watching that from a day-to-day perspective?
Yeah, we have pretty good technology that we didn't have when I first got into the restaurant industry. When I first got in and got into management, it was literally a piece of paper that I printed out every 30 minutes, and here's how many guests have ordered food.
Wow.
Here's how many employees I have on the clock, and there would be like a literal loading chart that would say if you're doing this and it's at this time, you need this many employees, and I would make cuts off of that.
Wow.
First, now I have an app that I can look and man, I can be on vacation in Hawaii and I can look at my sales and labor and everything that's going on. So there's great technology, but that's kind of the good technology is kind of dictating. We're building forecasting based off of averages. Like it can tell you the last 13 weeks what you've done on a Thursday, right? And it'll take out the slowest Thursday and it'll take out the busiest Thursday and create a good aggregate average outside of that. And you can probably anticipate, unless there's something big going on that it wouldn't know, it can tell you about what kind of sales you're going to do for the day. And that kind of really helps you make your schedule, order your food, plan.
Okay, so that helps you make decisions on a day-to-day basis. How far do you look out? Is it like every week? Are you planning out every 2 weeks, I guess?
Yeah, I would say we're kind of 2 weeks advance on our schedule. A lot of people, we're pretty popular on parties and booking things, and the people don't do that super far in advance. So if you do it way in advance, you're going to end up changing it anyways. So about 2 weeks is pretty safe for us.
2 weeks, and you're doing, what does that all entail? So you obviously look forecasted sales, maybe any big events coming up, like a big reservation? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like sometimes we book parties that are 150 people, right? So the staffing would change pretty dramatically based off if that's happening or not. So we're taking a look at any events, any type of sporting events. We do live music on occasion, and we've been around long enough to know what that's going to dictate whenever we have them.
Okay. So then, yeah, that helps build out the revenue piece, I guess, forecasting that. And then do you kind of go down from there of like, what staffing do I need? What kind of food inventory do I need? Like, what are the main buckets, I guess, that you look at?
Yeah. So the variable expenses that would change on sales is for sure going to be your food cost ordering, your labor, your expectation of what sort of comps or discounts that you're going to be rolling out based on what's going on. Then it's simple stuff, chemicals, toilet paper, small wares.
Yeah, then walk me through, like, what does it look like to actually plan out the people aspect of?
Yeah, so, the first thing you do is figure out the sales, right? Forecast what the sales are going to be. And then, like, for us on labor, I'm looking to do, like, 18.6% of sales going to the labor category.
Okay.
So, like, I would then, hey, if this is what my sales is going to be, my budget for how much I can schedule is going to be roughly 18.6% of that.
Okay.
And then, when it comes to the food cost, you can break down what your overall sales are, and we're roughly like a 60% food, 40% different alcohol. So I'm creating my kitchen labor to be roughly 18.6% of the food sales, and that's how we'll make a kitchen schedule.
Okay. Wow, I didn't realize it would be an exact percentage. I love the decimals.
Yeah, it's 18.6. That's live and die by it.
Yeah, that's great. So then on the inventory or food side, so obviously alcohol you can have out for a while. Talk about that in a second. But food, how much does spoilage affect you, I guess?
Yeah, so we try to keep any waste at about 4.5% or less of what we're ordering. Most items that you get are actually kind of imperishable items. A lot of like the pasta and the sauces, they last a good amount of time. But when you're getting meat or chicken, you're looking at, optimistically like a 7-day shelf life on them. But, when you do something full time, like our chefs do, and they're doing most of the ordering, you've got a pretty good idea of what your mix is going to be, like the breakdown of which items that you're going to sell, just because you've been doing it for years and years and years.
Yeah.
And it's pretty consistent and easy to kind of hit that 4.5% or less. But yeah, I'm factoring in that menu when I'm creating a menu price. If I want it to sit in the 35% range, I have to know probably 4% of that is going to go to spoilage.
Okay. So you were talking 18.6?
18.6 on the labor, yeah.
Yeah. And then what'd you say, 35 for food?
35% food cost goal.
And 4% of that's probably
Yeah, four and a
Wow.
half.
And
Yeah.
what is that? Mostly like meat and stuff?
Yeah, meat, and a lot of times it's, Becky orders a cheeseburger and she says medium, but she doesn't know what medium is, and then she wants you to make a new one. So it's a combination. Some of it's spoilage, some of it's stuff that's misrang in, some of it's the guest expectation and just wanting something remade.
So that makes sense. So you're pretty much trusting your cooks to
Yeah.
do the ordering of the food?
The chefs, not the cooks, but
Oh, boy, the
the
chefs, yes.
management. Yeah.
The management,
Yeah.
okay. So do you get into that detail quite a bit, or is it you found a good system?
I don't have to, because there's kind of a system of trust of I've been working with the same people for a really long time. But my own journey is I was a kitchen manager for a period of time, so I understand and can offer some guidance. And we look at our profit and loss statement every month, and I'm constantly, one of the biggest line items, right, is like red meat and poultry. So I spent a good amount of time looking at it, but I'm not like, they're not printing off like their potential truck orders and I'm approving it or anything. There's a good system of trust there.
Okay. And you'll see it, like if you're just trusting them, you'll see it when the financials come out, right? Like
Yeah.
spoil it.
Yeah.
Can you tell what spoilage?
Yeah, we use a program called Margin Edge, which works for us really well. But like whenever I create a menu item, it talks to the point of sale software where we're ringing it in. And then every menu item I've built a recipe for. So I know if I sell one cheeseburger, right, it's going to be one brioche bun, one half-pound burger patty, one slice of cheese, lettuce, tomato, onion, pickle, and then one side item, right? So it gives you a theoretical based off of your sales. And then when I count beginning inventory, end inventory, and then I throw in the purchase receipts, it tells me how much I've wasted of every item that we sell. Yeah.
Okay. And does that stay the same pretty regularly then?
Yeah, there's some fluctuation based on what's going on. For example, if we do a Taylor Swift concert, they're drinking and eating much different food than if we have a Colts game, right?
Okay.
But so there's some fluctuation, but the overall number is pretty consistent. Yeah.
Okay. So then any other bucket, I guess you have like, I guess, okay, let's go then to, you did people's time. So 18.6,
Mhm.
you did food, like your inventory, your food, any other.
Yeah, so alcohol is
Alcohol.
another big one for us, which alcohol is a much better margin than the food is. So if we're sitting somewhere at about 20%, 19.5, 20% on our alcohol cost of goods, I would say that's the big three for us, right? And I when you look at a profit and loss statement, right, there's fixed expenses, and those are things that stay the same month to month, right? The rent is going to be what the rent is going to be. Manager salaries is going to be what manager salaries are going to be. Like you might offer a marginal raise every year, but for the most part, those are going to stay pretty consistent. And then there's variable expenses, right? Those are things that can have a high degree of fluctuation based on how much time and effort you put into them. And so that's food costs, that's going to be labor, it's going to be liquor costs, and then comps is another. What are you discounting? What are you giving out for free? When a guest complains, what are you doing to make it right, to make it accurate versus what are you kind of over giving? And then, are you letting your staff order too much on a discount, right? Those are things I spend most of my time thinking about, is those variable expenses.
So on your alcohol, is there a few like main movers?
Yeah.
Kind of everything else just sits kind of a rare thing, or is it everything kind of moves?
Yeah, obviously we wanted to move or we wouldn't carry it. So, but the things move at different levels, right? Domestic beers are our number one mover. Miller Lite, Coors Light, Modelo, stuff like that is our bread and butter that makes us most of our money when it comes to liquor sales. Outside of that, like there's vodka, like Tito's vodka. I buy about 100 cases of Tito's a year per location. And then other big movers are we're in a tequila area where people really like tequila and are ordering it more than normal. So Patron, Don Julio are big time movers for us. And then I would say we're successfully setting ourselves up as a good bourbon space. And so like those Sazerac bourbons usually move really quick, the Buffalo Traces of the world.
So sometimes I see at restaurants like hundreds of bottles, maybe hundreds is overstating it, but just a ton of bottles sitting out. Like, can you like destroy your restaurant doing that?
Oh, yeah. I've fired managers over an inability to control that well. So one thing I like about corporate restaurants, and that's a little bit of my background. I'm very thankful to not kind of be in the corporate world anymore because I appreciate the freedom of working for a small business. But corporates, they have mandates, right? Some guy in Florida is saying you're going to carry this beer, this food, this wine, this whiskey. And that's good because different sales companies have different quotas and different products that they're anticipating to sell. And the bar manager wants to think like that their rep is their friend that's out to help them out, but their rep's job is to sell the products that they sell, right?
Yeah.
And so you get these people who, and it's definitely comes naturally, right? Because restaurant managers are naturally people pleasers, right? It's what we do all day long. We want to make people happy that come into our restaurant. And because people who are really good at being people pleasers are then being talked to by someone who they think is their friend, it's very easy to kind of say yes to whatever crap that they're slinging. So you've got to be able to like have a good relationship with your reps to where it's a true partnership. But I've seen so many managers to where like I almost feel like their reps know like, oh, if I've got a quota on some crap vodka that I know no one else will buy, I'll go talk to this person and they'll buy
They'll
it.
just buy it.
Yeah,
Nice.
yeah, and so like that. It's a very risky thing because then when you don't sell it, you end up like finding ways to sell it for next to nothing, and then that completely throws off your cogs. Yeah.
Okay, that makes sense. So there's buying stuff that's obviously not going to sell, and then like when you're first starting a restaurant, can you like kill yourself there too? Like just buying like stuff that's not going to.
Yeah, and that's the thing. Like I was saying, you got to understand who you want to be as far as what you buy. And I would hope if you're not an expert in those sorts of things, you're reaching out to people who are before you buy them. I'm at a point now because our owners are connected people with a lot of people who are trying to open up their own restaurants. I do spend a pretty good amount of time like being that expert for someone else. So like, hey, I'm trying to open up this random restaurant. Can you tell me who to talk to in the industry that can get me good products? What are some products I need to have on hand? And I feel like maybe there are businesses out there that just wing it, right? Here's what I like, and so I'm going to buy it. And you end up overspending on crap you're never going to sell for sure.
Yeah, that seems like if I had to guess, it seems like a common thing of like, I like this food or I like this beer, so I'm going to go start a restaurant. Hope other people buy it. Not everybody likes it.
Yeah, it's a dime a dozen for every neighborhood bar. Why do you have this? Well, that's because what I like.
Yeah.
And it's funny because I have to walk that line because I have a pretty good idea of what sells and what doesn't sell, but I also have owners that I work for who occasionally just really like a particular thing. And so it's like I have cottage cheese as a side on my menu, and it makes just no financial sense to sell cottage cheese. But I have an owner who likes to come in and eat a side of cottage cheese when he's here, so I'm selling it.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So I guess going back to finishing on the P&L just for a second.
Yeah.
Have you worked for people who like you have? It seems like you don't have it down to science. This percent, 18% for labor.
Yeah.
I'm just trying to remember.
18.6. Yeah.
And then 30. Was it 35?
35% is kind of our food cost standard. Yeah.
Have you worked for people who don't pay any attention to that, or don't have a clue what they
Yes. So for my upbringing, right, I come from Darden, which Darden is kind of the largest full service restaurant in the world. And their standards are a little bit different than what my standards are now, but they really teach you to understand and hone your craft of being a good financial servant of their money. And when I was with Darden, I just kind of assumed every general manager had an understanding of labor goals, food cost goals. But then like when I left and started working for more local businesses, I kind of learned that that's a lot more rare than it should be, right? And some owners, it's not even that the general managers don't want to learn or they don't care. Some owners almost want to hide like their failures even from the staff. And so I've been to places or talked to other managers where I'm like, why don't you understand this? How have you been in the industry this long? You kind of learn that there are owners out there that kind of gatekeep the P&L and they don't let anybody look at it but themselves. And then just other owners, right, who are out there and maybe they're really good at something else. And so they don't know necessarily how to teach their management staff how to be good financial advocates for the company. But yeah, I mean, it's at this point, I would say it's almost 50-50 on people who really understand cost of goods, labor, the full P&L, and then those who really just don't know what they're doing.
Yeah. Yeah, that's interesting. It's almost like, so you basically got essentially an education from Darden, is what you're saying, on how to properly do it. And some people just have never
never experienced. And some people maybe did and didn't care, but most of them, it's not like they woke up and they're like, oh, I want to be a sucky manager today.
Yeah.
Right? They just didn't have the tools to learn how to do it.
Yeah, and then in terms of the owner that doesn't want to share the financials, can that work? Like, I guess maybe if you're an owner that really watches it, but like,
I don't think it can, personally.
Unless you're the manager also.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah. And there could be some smaller restaurants where the owner is kind of the day-to-day operator, and maybe that's one thing. But yeah, if people are running your business and they don't know what decisions they can make that positively or negatively impact, and they're not seeing, like, the snowball roll downhill and get bigger, how are you going to get them to think making sound financial decisions when they don't see it?
Yeah, that makes sense. That's a P&L. I guess moving into, let's go into like just from a starting perspective. So you weren't with these owners when they started, right?
Correct. I've been with them for about 3 years, but they've been open for 11.
Okay. So have you ever been a part of a restaurant that was like initially starting?
No, that's kind of one thing I've been in different stages. So like I worked at Hard Truth and they had been open for just a couple of years. And then I've worked with Longhorn Steakhouse where they've been open since 1981, but I've never been at a place where I like day one opened the store. And that's probably one of my next career goals and challenges that I'd like to do, is kind of be in that situation, but I'm not as it stands now.
Yeah, that makes sense. I guess just on that, I guess it's kind of figuring out the menu and the brand, I guess, is probably the main first thing, right? When you're going to start. Like, knowing what you know now, how would you go about thinking about starting?
Yeah, I mean, I would try to look at my community that I'm considering opening in, and then just see, like, what talent do I have or what can I offer that there's a gap of. So for us, right, that really good sports bar that also had good food was a gap, right? Maybe in your community there's no fine dining, right? Or maybe in your community there's, like in the town I live in, there's 17 pizza places and that's it, right? So there's a lot of gaps. So kind of understanding the gaps, and then like having someone, if that's not you, that can give you a really good financial picture of what it would take to actually successfully open it, how much finances you need. Because a lot of stores, you almost see them, they never even open, right? They've miscalculated what the cost is going to be before they even get to the point where revenue's coming in.
I've heard you say also that you would want to open it only in a place where it can make a certain amount.
Yeah.
Is that like a huge factor in?
Yeah. So certain things, the more cash flow that is coming in, the easier it is, right? 18.6% is like the labor number I threw out. It's really hard to do that if you only make $3,000 in sales a day, right? Yeah. And so if you're going to do less than that, you're going to have a less number. And so like, what's a feasible number to where you can still operate on a daily level? So for us, with like the rent that we're paying and those fixed expenses that we can't control, like the manager salaries that we've chosen to get, for us, there's kind of almost like a benchmark of we need to do $5 million a year in annual revenue for it to make sense for us.
Okay. That makes sense. So it's figuring out those fixed costs, and then you kind of have to dial in those percentages, like you said, and see after that, does it make sense to open it?
Yeah.
Basically.
Yeah. And the good news is most people aren't just like building restaurants from the ground up, right? They're buying buildings or locations that have had things there in the past. And so it's easy to see like, oh, if I want to buy this building that used to be an Olive Garden, well, what did Olive Garden do when they were there, right? Not that Olive Gardens are closing down their doors very much, but it gives you a good picture. Yeah.
So generally, if you're going into a spot, you can figure out how would you figure that out? Like, I guess
Yeah,
maybe
I
'cause you're
mean,
buying.
most owners, right? The people who actually own the building aren't the brands. It's usually just an individual property owner. So they're usually pretty communicative on like, hey, here's what this place did in their revenue. And so like we're kind of in the exploratory process. If there's a situation that's right for us to where we would get into a new location, we have been able to see numbers of previous places that were there.
That makes sense. So is it just like a large numbers game to start in a way?
Yeah, at
Like
least in my experience, yeah,
to start to figure out if it makes you got to figure out if it makes financial sense.
yeah. But
But you also need that. Yeah.
but I mean, part of it's just a gamble too, and that's the reason. Like, I don't own my own restaurant is because some places that were incredibly successful. Like I come from Longhorn Steakhouse. Their first day of opening, when they were in Atlanta, Georgia, they sold 9 lunches and 13 dinners. Right,
Okay.
and so it's like now they have 550 locations all over America. So like you're just taking a gamble that what you have is good, and then the guests will then tell you if that's true or not. So it's a risk. It's not just numbers, because some of it's just a leap of faith if I'm going to give this a shot.
Yeah, that's super interesting to actually figure out what people like. I guess at your current restaurant, have you seen that change? Like you said, because it did start out as like a craft
Yeah,
brewery place.
and that's what like I said, tequila is something that's really popular right now, and that's something that we're exploring. People have different food tastes and different uh, drink tastes of what they like, and culture kind of shifts that a lot as well. Like Post Malone can come out with a song where he's drinking High Noon in the song, right? And all of a sudden High Noon's in a place where it used to not be. It's the espresso martinis. I've seen it have just like a meteoric rise and then a collapse into nothing. So you're following trends as well.
Yeah. So is part of owning or managing a restaurant, is it that adapting then? And how do you kind of watch that and figure that out?
Yeah, you've got to be in touch with what's going on around you. Like, you can't be one of those, like, in your personal life, you're off the grid, right?
Yeah.
You got to be regularly eating out to eat, seeing what's being successful at other brands, kind of what other people are pushing in a successful way. And then there's got to be just a willingness to try something new and see how it goes, right? We're doing sometimes like a 1-day brunch for a day where we know it can be successful. Like the Colts had a game in Berlin. Hey, let's try a brunch, and then let's try some things we've been thinking about doing when we have a captive audience and see how it goes, right? Some places that's a feature menu, right? You go to a place and like, oh, here's our August menu.
Mm-hmm.
What they're really doing is saying like, what can we add or sell, and how do we test that before we experience it long term?
Yeah. So walk me through those meetings then of what is that? Is that you just like coming up with ideas? Is it do your people help?
Yeah,
Owners?
the thing I have done well in my career is like I feel like I'm a very good assessor of other people, and so like I have a really good team of people around me that may have been in different positions, but I've either through luck or just some sort of natural ability, I kind of am able to put them into places that make a lot of sense. So I have some general managers that work for us that are really smart, successful people, and then we have owners that are good at being business people, even if they're not restaurant people. And so like I'm usually leading those conversations, but it's definitely collaborative.
Is it safe to say like you want to manage or own a restaurant, you need that kind of entrepreneurial spirit of, okay, just because I start like this doesn't mean it's going to end like this. Like it sounds like you're constantly adapting.
Yeah, and I'm constantly in fear that something out of my control is going to happen that affects it in a major way as well. Yeah, like for example, Tyrese Halliburton could tear his ACL, and then your whole next year is ruined, right? I could wake up tomorrow having gone through COVID, right, and there could be some other great pandemic, and all of a sudden you're shut down. So you got to be adaptive, and then you got to plan for the worst while you're hoping for the best.
What was COVID like? Where were you at? I know
So I was a general manager. They call it managing partner at Longhorn Steakhouse. At the time, I had 55 employees that worked for me, and one day I had to lay off all 55 of them. And Yeah, so we were ordered in Indiana to go only. You weren't allowed to go out and eat, but you could still order food, and so we just completely changed our business, and management made up kind of all of the hourly labor. So I was showing up most days and either cooking or personally bagging up food and running them out to cars. But I was working kind of 6 days a week, open to close there for a good minute, and just like having PTSD when I got home about the craziness of the day.
Yeah.
But probably the worst shift I've ever worked in my life was Mother's Day of 2020, because we were still to go only. And when your dining room is open, right, you might have 45, 55 tables, but when your tables are full, that's as much as you can handle. But when orders are coming in off of the internet,
There's no limit.
it's infinity, right? And so we had been through a period of time where everybody was worried, am I going to lose my job? Am I not going to have income, right? So March and April of that COVID shutdown were incredibly slow for us. But then, like, for the first time, there was a reason, like, hey, even in the middle of this pandemic, I want to treat my mom to something really nice. And it was almost as if every American woke up on Mother's Day and was like, I'm going to order to-go food from a restaurant for the first time since the start of the pandemic. And for us, like, we had cars wrapped around our building trying to get in. Just orders are printing off a second. It felt like, I don't know, there's a scene in The Bear. I don't know if you've ever seen that show, but like they open up DoorDash and they get like 1,000 DoorDash orders in a minute and they're just in a panic. Like, I feel like that was inspired by most people in the restaurant industry's Mother's Day COVID experience.
2020.
Yeah.
That's hilarious. Was it like awesome? It was obviously like an awesome business day, right? Or
I mean, especially from a financial sense, we were losing money every day leading up to that point. So like, it was great to get that type of revenue in, but it was more than we were kind of successfully able to do. And you'll notice like a lot of websites that sell food and a lot of websites that like create wait lists for people. Like if you ever go to OpenTable or something, they set capacity limits, and we didn't need those before COVID existed.
Gotcha.
So now, like if I place an order at Cracker Barrel online and it tells me like, oh, I can't pick it up for an hour and a half. It used to not do that. It used to be you place it, it knew like, oh, it's pancakes. That takes 15 minutes. Show up 15 minutes from now. Versus now they kind of toggle and throttle those to come in at a more doable pace. So those sort of things didn't exist, May of 2020, whenever Mother's Day happened. And it was just, it was good money, but it wasn't worth it. And I know a lot of other restaurants, they just kind of like shut down and didn't fulfill orders. And we weren't quite at that point, but I thought about it. That's for sure.
Dang. Yeah. Just from the workload.
Yeah, I mean, your grill, if it's a 60-inch grill, right, it can only fit so many steaks or so many chicken breasts on it. And when, you need to cook 100 of them in a 15-minute period of time and they all show up at the same time, there's just not space to do that, let alone like someone who's competent enough to make all of that at the same time.
Man, that's intense. It's a crazy day. Right?
Oh, yeah. And it's funny. So I just worked the busiest day of my career with this Big Ten championship with IU.
Oh, yeah.
And even though that was my busiest day, that wasn't even close to my most stressful day. Like if you talk to almost any restaurant operator that was around during COVID and you're like, hey, what's the worst day you've ever worked? Mother's Day 2020 is probably most of their answers.
That's crazy.
Yeah,
I can only imagine. So Big Ten championship bigger than like Pacers.
Yeah. So the NBA Finals was great, but with the Big Ten championship, we also had the benefit of like IU basketball was playing Louisville and Cambridge, and so like there were 4 or 3 different schools' fan bases, right? IU fans were like, hey, I'm going to go to Indianapolis and make a whole day of it, right? I'm going to go to the basketball game and I'm going to go to the football game. And then Louisville fans are like, hey, Louisville or Indy's not that far away from Louisville. I'm going to go watch the Louisville IU basketball game. And then Ohio State fans are all over America, even though that stinks, but they're everywhere, right? Yeah. And they're going to come. So we just had Ohio State, Indiana, Louisville, multiple events to where it was just an all-day kind of onslaught of business.
And you got to go to the game.
I did. I got to go to the game. It was pretty cool.
So that's one, because I hear you go to different stuff or you meet celebrities. Maybe like talk about some of the people.
Right? And I talked about it a little bit, like the corporations that have mandated menus, if I'm a guy that has to sell food, right, I don't need to spend much time going to those different restaurants or locations because they don't have the ability to dictate what makes it on the menu, whether that be food or beverage, right? Versus us being a local restaurant and a high volume local restaurant, I have a lot of say over what goes on the menu, whether that be food or drink. And so because of that, these people that do want to sell things, they develop relationships with me where they might not be developing relationships with other people. And it's not necessarily a quid pro quo if they're wanting to make me happy because I have buying power, but just because they're in there so much, we have good relationships. And because they work for such big brands, right? If you ever turn on TV and they're like, High Noon, proud sponsor of Indiana Athletics.
Yeah.
You know they're getting Indiana tickets because they're partners with one another. And so I'm in a rare situation where I get to know the right people to get spoiled beyond my own financial means. Yeah.
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 Yeah, for sure. I can only imagine what that Big Ten ticket would have cost.
Yeah. I did in this situation, like I got to be in a suite. And so like I couldn't even get on StubHub and look up what suite tickets were because they didn't exist. Right. But I know just to get into the stadium, right, it got up to like $700 and that was up in the top row of the highest section. So I'm sure it was like equivalent to a nice week-long vacation. I instead went to a football game.
Yeah, for sure. So, I mean, it's cool though, because like if you're someone who's looking at being in restaurant management or owning a restaurant, it's something you probably, when you're planning, unless you've been in it, don't really think about. But then, like, hey, there's a $3,000 ticket.
It's definitely a cool job perk. And, other places have cool job perks as well. Like, for example, one perk I don't have is that my wife has is she gets a snow day, right?
Yeah,
That's a cool perk.
Yeah.
She works at a school and they get summers off, right? If you, for example, I have a friend that works at UPS and because they partner with the Masters, he's going to the Masters tournament every year. So there's a lot of cool perks that are kind of different depending on where you work. But my perks are pretty sweet where I'm at, that's for sure.
Yeah, for sure. So I guess, like, looking back on your journey, what do you think like allowed you to continue to move up? Because I feel like with restaurants, I feel like you could probably get stuck, or like maybe an owner or people don't trust you to be, the general manager, or things like that. Like, what did you learn to get there? I guess.
So for me, like I would credit a lot of that to my time in the military. And not even with tangible things, but for me, like I was in middle school when September 11th happened. And so kind of like being a kid and seeing maybe not everyone in the world thinks like you, for me was really, as weird as that sounds, kind of inspiring to be someone that goes out and makes a change. So I kind of decided in 6th grade, I wanted to join the military. And then I ended up picking the Marine Corps because a lot of things in school were kind of not motivating and felt easy. And I never really challenged myself much in life. And for me, like I felt like the Marine Corps was the biggest challenge that I could have by joining the military. But it taught me to work harder than anyone else, or at least be willing to when the situation arises. Anytime like I have someone who's complaining like, oh, I worked 11 days without a day off, right? I tell them like one time I deployed in February and I got back home and it was the next February, right? And I had no days off in between them. So like it gives you a willingness to work really hard. It gives you an appreciation for little things. Like for me, like when I was in Afghanistan, for example, just the thought of like sleeping in a bed and having a Coca-Cola and eating a cheeseburger, like little things you do every day were things like I missed so much, right? And so for me, like it gives me a calmness when I'm at work because at the end of the day, like I know I get to go home. I know I get to sleep in a bed. I know I get to take a shower. I get to drink coffee. I get to talk to my wife. And because like you appreciate smaller things far more than you used to, it really helps you stay calm. And so for me, like my initial success came from the fact that like the military taught me to be on time. The military taught me that there are worse things to complain about than having a stressful day of work. They taught me to be reliable, to be trustworthy, to have integrity. And when you're at like the lowest point of the employment ladder, little tiny things like consistently showing up, going to work even when you got a little sniffle, being willing to stay late when they need someone to stay late, like that can really differentiate you from your peers. And that requires no talent or skill. It just requires a work ethic, right? So for me, that was the thing that initially helped my success, got my foot in the door that maybe other peers around me might have known more about restaurants at the time because they had worked there longer, but they weren't willing to put in the extra work that I was willing to put in because by comparison, I felt like I wasn't working that hard because the Marine Corps was a lot of work,
Yeah.
right? And then beyond that, like I think having a good assessment of who you are and who you aren't as a person is really successful. I think people that want to get better every day are going to find ways to be successful. So for me, I knew what I knew and I knew what I didn't know. And I tried to learn and make the things that were my weaknesses. I tried to develop them into my strengths. And then when I felt like I accomplished that, I'm like, okay, I need to identify new weaknesses in my life. And a lot of people kind of live with this mindset of like, if you ever call them out on their weakness, they're very defensive. And I really tried to be the opposite of that because finding out what you're weak in is what's going to make you a better person. And so for me, like some of my weaknesses were like I was a really nice guy. And because I was a nice guy, I was kind of scared of being controversial, right? So like I had finally climbed the first step of the ladder just off of working hard. But then I had to learn like, hey, sometimes there's healthy confrontation. There's times where the guy that you used to be a coworker with, now you have to lead him, right? And so those things that were my weaknesses, instead of just saying like, oh, that's who I am, it was like, how do I force myself to get into situations where these things that I'm scared of or these things that I'm bad at, how do I then make them my greatest strengths?
Yeah.
And so it got to that point, and then if you're just continually doing that and you don't think it's going to be a quick road, right? You are willing to invest 10, 20, 30 years into doing that type of mindset, you'll probably end up with some degree of success wherever you're at.
That makes sense. Yeah. Yeah, that's maybe the most important part is what you said at the end. Like it was all great, but like the patience,
Yeah.
something you don't think about because it's not, you don't get there.
Yeah, I've had a lot of people who are like, "Hey, I want you to mentor me, or I want to do what you did," and I almost am just kind of disinterested in doing it anymore because like what
Takes
I
so much time,
what I did
right?
took a decade,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And so many people are like, "Oh, I changed my habits for 3 weeks. How come you didn't promote me?" I was like, "Because it took me 5 years," right? So yeah, it's people, they're willing to put in the work short period, but just willing to absolutely change who they are and to know that it's a grind that's going to require some patience. Most people, for whatever reason, don't want to do that.
Yeah, that makes sense. And one other thing you said that kind of caught my attention a little bit, I guess, is I feel like in restaurants, you could be that person who like overreacts to everything, maybe like where a customer complains about something or your employee calls off. Like there's probably so much that goes wrong.
Yeah.
And like you were talking about with military, it's like it probably made you realize that that's not that big of a deal and you can figure out like a solution to it.
Yeah.
It's probably like a huge part too.
Yeah. I mean, for sure. Restaurants are a high stress job in comparison to a lot of jobs. Maybe not in comparison to being an infantry marine in Afghanistan, right? But for a lot of jobs, it's high stress. And that's just like, I just had a lot of experience with situations that were way more stressful that kind of made it feel not as high stress as it was. But that's something I see a lot. You take people that are really kind and they're really talented at what they do, and you try to move them up to the next step of the ladder. And even though they're physically capable, they're kind of mentally not ready for that level of stress, and you kind of see them flounder a lot. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So walk me through that. Like you have, I don't know, maybe like a recent situation, or I'm just thinking like a customer complains, customer's unhappy about something that's like actually not just like them
Yeah.
complaining to complain, but it's a real thing. Like, how do you process through that? How do you handle those types of situations?
I'm a huge believer in like the phrase, the guest wins the moment of truth, right? If it comes down to the moment of truth, if I can choose for me to be right or for you to be right in a situation, you're the one that pays to be here. I'm going to let you be right. So even if, like we talked about Becky who ordered a medium cheeseburger, right? I could say that's our medium, right? But how is she going to feel if I respond to that, right? Or if I go above and beyond and I help her out on a one-time basis, as opposed to her telling 10 people about their negative experience, she's going to tell 5 people about how she went there and had an issue and somebody took care of her and that it went well. So I always try to let the guests win the moment of truth, unless it's like a truly ethical thing that's gone on, like someone got handsy with a waitress or is cussing someone out. Like maybe then in that situation, I'm going to treat it differently.
Yeah.
But just like letting the guest win, being willing to accept criticism or accept people maybe being ruder to you than what you would anticipate, and then just like not letting that be personable. And then, for us, it's I use the acronym like ART. You apologize, you react, and then you thank them, right? Hey, I'm sorry this went wrong. Here's how I'm gonna fix it. Here's my reaction to that. And then after you fixed it, like, hey, thanks for bringing this to my attention. I appreciate it. I hopefully you feel like it got fixed for you.
And most people probably respond pretty well after you fix it.
Most do, yeah.
Most.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which, and it's probably true of every industry. Over time, you've seen it all. But when you're in a place that also sometimes mixes alcohol with anger, in the sense that we're selling, beer, sometimes you get the worst out of people. But most people are pretty chill. Yeah.
Yeah. I guess wrapping it up, if you had to say somebody wants to start a restaurant, work up to be a manager in a restaurant, like first give the honest take of like what just sucks, what they have to know just sucks about the job.
Yeah, so there's kind of like a prototypical idea of what your average work day should look like that you see in culture, right? It's going to work at 9, getting off at 5, having dinner with the family, having a set bedtime. None of that is true in the restaurant industry, right? We're busiest by nature when other people aren't working, right? So my busy times are the opposite of a normal person's busy time. Most people look forward to the weekend versus the weekend is when I'm going to work the hardest. And you might get Mother's Day off to be with your mom. You might get 4th of July off to be with your family. But typically when you're in those situations, you're going out to eat with the family, which means that people in the restaurant industry are working on those days. So if I had to say like a biggest negative, I don't like to use the word like quality of life, but it's, you're working nights, you're working weekends, you're working holidays, you're working long hours, and you're standing up on your feet a lot are kind of some negatives.
Yeah. And then what is then the flip side, the most rewarding, would you say for you?
Yeah. So for me, most of my favorite memories as a child, like involve having a good meal with my family of some kind, right? It's either Christmas, you all get together and eat, or you go out and you celebrate your brother's birthday, your mom's birthday. And because those memories were like core in my heart, I really enjoy being able to make those memories for other people. And just being a part of special moments in people's life is something I really enjoy. I also just really enjoy good quality food. So just like being one of the drivers of making food be good or be better is something that I really enjoy. And the good news is right, if you're a finance person and you have a client and they make you miserable, you might have to deal with that client every day for 20 years. Versus if I'm in the restaurant and you're a guest and you're making my life miserable, the odds are an hour from now, you're going to be gone and I'm never going to see you again. So the negatives don't last as long, maybe in some other professions.
Yeah, I guess that brings up an interesting point, I guess. Like what would you say, are all restaurants the same? I guess are each kind of different, but like the returning customers, like how, if you had to guess, what % of your revenue is like returning?
So on average, I'm going to hit you with another very specific stat, but this is something I was taught growing up. 56% are usually made up by guests that go to your restaurant more than once a month.
Okay.
So, roughly 60% of all of your weekly sales in a normal situation, which downtown Indianapolis might not be normal, but for the north side, 60% are going to be repeat customers.
Okay. And do you treat those people different?
Oh
Do you
yeah,
notice
yeah,
them?
yeah. And recognizing guests by name and kind of making it feel personable is one way that you kind of create them as regulars. And like, I'm not gonna bend over backwards and let them in for free, but like doing little things to let them know that you value them as someone who comes in regularly will definitely help your business. Yeah.
I guess last thing, what? Because I feel like in your role, you've really earned the trust of your owners. Like they trust you. How do you go about earning that, or what do you feel like you did that allowed you to do that?
I mean, personally, I have high integrity, right? I'm going to do the morally right thing, and then I'm going to be honest with them about my weaknesses to where, like, if I say like, hey, this is something I'm struggling with, and I'm communicative to them on what that is, typically you perceive that person as not being prideful or not being shady. And so just being high trust, delivering results over a long period of time really helps you develop that trust, and then just being transparent and honest about your strengths and weaknesses.
Yeah. So it's more like funny. It's more like core, core normal human things than it is.
I mean, people try to overcomplicate business, but a lot of it's just normal core everyday values.
Awesome. Well, thanks for joining us today, Bryan. Really appreciate it.
Cool.